Hello, and welcome to Ark Raiders. And in this video, I'll be looking to just kind of discuss my thoughts on the current state of things within the game, and hopefully, if you've been noticing these things as well, maybe this will give you a bit of a cathartic release, knowing that yes, we've all noticed, and what you think has been happening has been, and I'm going to be discussing my thoughts on perhaps how they can go about maybe adjusting things to fix it and that. But the big question initially is, well, what's wrong? What's the problem? But again, I think if you're like me, initially when I started playing, a fair few, about a month and a bit ago now, shortly after release, I initially started playing in trios, and it was a fairly hostile environment. Everyone's shooting each other just like any other extraction game. But a day or two afterwards, I tried solos, and I was pleasantly surprised. I think many people are that Ark Raiders, especially in solos, is probably the most chill extraction game you will have ever played. And it's a brilliant way to go and just get yourself some much needed supplies, gear yourself up before you head back into the fray on some of the trio games and so on. And that's been my experience, and I think many people will have found that it is a nice, chill game. But what's happened, and I think we've all felt this, is that Ark has been trying to walk this tightrope between two very different types of player communities, and we're now seeing one of those player communities starting to overtake and really impact the other. And I think we all know what I'm talking about here. And it's basically that they're trying to please the PvP players as well as the PvE players at the same time. And they seem to be unable to do it. I've got some bit of a B-roll footage here. I filmed a few games just to throw in the background while I'm talking. The first one you'll notice is an interesting interaction on Stella Montis of all maps, where I literally bumped into someone and we were friendly and got through the entire solo lobby of Stella Montis again, of all places. If you've played the game, you'll know what that map's like. And we managed to extract. And I'll let you see the ending. It's quite spicy, but that'll just be on in the background, then followed by a few PvP excursions I went on, and then some little loot runs that I just filmed to put in the background here. But if you're not interested, then by all means move me to your second monitor. You won't miss all that much. I'll be talking throughout the whole thing. But yeah, so to get to my point, essentially they're trying to please two masters here. They're trying to please two communities, yeah? And when you try to please both, well, we all remember that famous quote from the Helldivers CEO not long back. If you try to make a game for everyone, you make a game for no one. So they're walking this tightrope act, is the way I see it. And I think what's happening is very slowly but surely, and we're seeing it now that people are getting geared up and they're trying to get as much as they can to get ready their expeditions. I'm recording this at the time where they've just the other day announced that you're going to need 5 million credits to be earned if you want to get the most out of your expeditions. And I think everyone's on a mad scramble now to get that. And it's absolutely absurd, and everyone's just murdering each other. To put this into context, the first time I was playing in solos, I went 2 days before I fired my weapon. Right? 2 days. No one shot at me, and I shot at no one else for 2 days. Right? In a PvP game, of all things. And it is absolutely ridiculous. I loved it, and I just went and I farmed up all the materials I needed to do up my workshop, got everything upgraded, and the first time I fired my weapon was when I was, for the first time, taking on a leaper. And so, for the first time, I was taking on one of the bigger enemies, and it was a leaper. I'd looked how to do it online. You get a little jolt mine, you put a blaze trap next to it, and then just aggro the thing while you stood in a building. You just put the traps on the doorway. It's fantastic. it just cooks itself. And someone saw me doing it. Called out to them, "Hey Raider, don't shoot," and they did the same. The moment I touched that loot, like the glimmer of gold was in his eyes, and we ended up in a big shootout. Luckily, he'd completely underestimated me, and he was trying to shoot at me with a ferro rifle, and I'd brought a ferro and a stitcher. So he was outgunned, he'd only got a free loadout, and I won. But that's what broke my 2-day streak. And we're getting into the game now where, as I say, the past 2 days I've been on, I've had 2 friendly games out of about a dozen, right? So it's completely flipped now. Now, most of my interactions are becoming, I'm just getting shot at, essentially. And it's getting a bit dire, and I just thought, like I said, I'm just going to go over what I think are the problems with this, and how maybe Embark could go to attempt to fix this as time goes by. But I'll be very curious to see how things develop after this initial season, and as things move into future seasons and things. And I think to start it off, there's always a few problems with extraction games. It's one of these genres where they've not quite figured out how to do it yet, and so there are just these design flaws built into the genre, and they are flaws, right? And these are affecting Ark Raiders just as badly as they're affecting all the other games in this genre. And rather than try to fix these issues by adjusting the mechanics and changing things up in a way that would get rid of them, they seem to have just fallen for the same trappings as everyone else. I can give a few examples here. So we'll start with the way that players we'll start with player churn, what we'll call player churn, and the way players gain power as they go through the game. So gaining power is you get it from getting loot. But what tends to happen, especially on games like Tarkov and things, you will basically, if you shoot someone else, you get their loot. You obtain their power, and this builds on into yours, yeah? So you kill them, you gain their stuff, add it to your own, you become more powerful, they become less so. Right? And each time that this happens, the players who are just getting absolutely stomped on, well, one of two things happens. They either become shoot-on-sight PvP players themselves, making this problem worse, or they get frustrated and simply quit. They don't want to be shooting people in the back, they don't like people who do, and they just get fed up of the game. Right? Fair enough. Right? Or maybe they just suck at it, I don't know, and they just get, like I said, get fed up, quit. Point is we can think of this almost as a pyramid scheme. The players at the bottom, your PvE casuals, are slowly getting bullied by everyone above them, right? Now, for the moment, PvP players, and I will say, right, I will say that these PvP players now, whenever they say, oh, it's all part of the game, get good scrub, stop sucking your noob, all this stuff, and I'm not going to say that they need to remove PvP or anything from the game. I don't want to be that guy, because I know that then everyone in the comments, oh, you know, you're pearl clutching, you just need to get good, all this stuff. Sure, but the problem is that as they do this, again, those PvE players are either going to get fed up and leave, or they're going to straight up, just turn into PvP players themselves and start getting their own back, right? If they do this, there's less PvE players. They're all going to turn to PvP players, and those PvP players are all going to be shooting each other. And then they're at the bottom of this pyramid. Then the people who are playing it more than them will start bullying them. And this continues, right? This just continues on and on. until basically at some point you find out that all the PvP casual, all the sort of like intermediate PvP players had left. And the next stage of the pyramid, because they've got fed up of losing all their stuff, and so the guys above them, the really good players, are now the ones playing, and they're starting to get frustrated because they're going into lobbies not full of PvE players. They're going into lobbies full of die-hard PvP players with epic tier loot now, right? And that's becoming their average game. Now, people will not play until they run out of stuff. They will play until they use up enough stuff that they're willing to lose, and then they'll give up, right? You can almost think of it as like the morale of an army. It eventually it wears out, right? And what's going to happen is eventually all of them leave, and you're just left with the very top players, and they're suddenly getting into lobbies, and they used to be going in with all their legendary tier epic, items and stuff, ripping through an entire lobby of solos single-handedly, and now they struggle to win a single engagement because obviously the other person is geared up to the nines as well. And the next problem you have is, okay, so that's what's happening with them, but the issue that you then get is, of course, if they do manage to kill someone, it's probably going to be a free loadout. Because most of the other people, if they're not geared up to the nines, they'll be running a free loadout because they don't want to be risking anything. And you're going to find that more and more often, right? So you've got this player churn and these power dynamics that are in play that are true with all extraction shooters, but again, Ark Raiders are yet to really figure out something to fix this problem. They've done nothing to do it. The expedition, which was about as clear as mud how that would work, they finally revealed all the details, literally like a week before it happens. And unfortunately, what this means is basically, from what I've seen, it's going to be super expensive to do, and it's completely optional. Meaning a lot of people aren't going to bother, and they're just going to simply leave, right? Well, they're just gonna leave it. They're not gonna bother. They're just gonna leave it out. Don't care. We're not doing that. Why the hell would we? Right? And that means they're gonna gain way more power. They're gonna go into the next. They're gonna be going into the next season and that with all of their gear, in the hopes that they can start crushing people again. And yeah, I don't see this ending well. So this has been completely unaddressed by literally everyone. And yeah, again, I was really hoping that they would do something interesting and innovative here that would solve this problem once and for all with extraction shooters, and they don't seem to have. Like, if they were offering some kind of one-off cosmetic, maybe some skill points and some other stuff like that, I think it could have worked, and that is what they're offering, but the requirements to get it are so high, because you don't just wipe, you have to gain an absolute massive ton of stuff in your stash and then wipe. That's where the problem is, and it's going to prevent people from wanting to do it. So, there's the issue. And of course, all of this, again, as we said, there's all these problems with these types of games, and so player churn, player power distribution from PvP players looting all the other people, and of course gear fear, all play into this. All of those problems are present, and nothing's getting resolved with this, right? And so what's going to end up happening is you've got the PvP diehards literally churning everyone out of the game. Everyone's starting to get gear fear. They're all using free loadouts if they're still playing at all. And we go into this weird death spiral, right? The other problems with the game are, of course, then that, and it's then as I say, they're trying to please two different communities here. One side of the game is wanting to essentially play the original game that was planned, the PvE version. They're wanting to play Mecha Hunter Wilds, you know, where you're just hunting giant mechs and getting parts and building cool gear to fight bigger mechs, right? And it's fair enough, and everyone who says that, oh well, without PvP it'd be boring, to a certain extent, but you'd amp up the amount of PvE at that point, you'd add new enemies, people would start engaging with the bosses more, yeah? So it wouldn't be as boring as you would think. But the other side are wanting to play Terminator Tarkov, where everything's out to kill you, right? And so you've got these two different communities. And I don't think that the problem with the PvE players is that they hate the PvP aspects. I think the main issue is the way in which it gets implemented into these extraction shooters. Like, the problem is always, right? The problem with these extraction shooters is always that it's the way in which you engage in PvP, right? And that gets me to another kind of sticking point the game has. Literally, it's something you would call friction. So, every time you interact with something, every time you loot something, there's this friction in the game where you have to go in an animation, you cause a lot of noise. It's very difficult to do anything without making it absolutely obvious and leaving yourself completely open to just being shot, right? So, what you then have is that, and now there's like, oh well, it adds to the tension, it adds to this and to it. It also leaves you completely open. And I will say, you can tell that the game is balanced around trios. I'm just going to put it out there pretty plainly. It has definitely been balanced around trios, not solos. In a trio, two of you can be looting while one's watching the backs. Even in duos, you can take turns, loot, one loot, one watch, right? But in solos, you are completely open, and if you get shot while this is happening, it's not your fault even if you die. Like, I'll be honest, if someone creeps up on you, doesn't make much noise, and you looked around beforehand, but they just happened to be right around that corner the moment you turned your camera and started looting, then you're dead. There's nothing you can do, and you've lost all your gear, right? And so this in solo, combined with the arc presence, because there's the same amount of arc on solo and trio. I've not noticed any difference, right? So solo, the atmosphere and the interactions you have to go through just make the game completely oppressive. You are being just literally just pinned down by the game's mechanics. You can't do anything without basically, I mean, you might as well just bend over with a target marked on your backside, right? You might as well. And and it's funny as well that I should say this. Like, I'm in a trio on this clip, and you can see we need to breach open this door, and well, two of us, we can easily kill the arc enemies. They're not a problem, even though the court is in the open. And breaching, well, one of us can watch while the other one does. And what that allows is, again, we can do it safely. But in a solo match, if anyone were to turn up at any point during that, I would be dead. And there's not much I can do about it. Even if you're careful, there's a lot of open ground you have to cross. And you can look around beforehand, but if someone just turns up suddenly, and they're in cover and you're not, you're dead. That's it. End of story. There's a lot of scenarios like this, and it's all, again, down to this just being, every time you do anything, there's an animation. It opens a menu, and you're stuck in there. And it's not great, right? So combine that with then the fact that now in a trio, it's like, okay, there's going to be PvP, but you're going to know about it. They're going to be hitting you, right? And they're going to hit one of you, then the other two turn around, and you're all shooting at them, and you get into an actual proper fight, and you've got a chance of some recourse. You can actually fight back, and so you don't feel too salty if you die in a trio lobby. But when you get into the solos, you usually just get taken out immediately with no way of fighting back. And this is true in every game that does this. If there's a way in the game in which you can die and it feels unfair, I remember a few months ago, Battlefield 6 had just released, and everyone was complaining that the shotguns could one-tap you. Granted, you'd basically have to be within, like, the distance of, like, the length of a room. But if you were close, yeah, you could absolutely just one-tap someone with a shotgun. Realistically, shotguns can actually, kill people up to like 100 meters away if you're accurate. But obviously they don't make them like that in games, and the reason why they don't usually make them like this is because, yeah, dying instantaneously without any way to at least damage the other person a little bit beforehand feels bad, right? It's why snipers in games are often balanced in a very particular way, where they have to get you with a perfect headshot. There's usually some drop. They have to put lead on it. There might be a glint in the scope to give you the opportunity to try and throw off their aim, right? Well, the same's true here. If you just get shot in the back while looting something, it sucks, basically. If you die in not quite a one tap, but before you can even get out of a search menu or cancel your breaching animation, no one likes that. No one. And it's not just obviously interacting with things, the extract itself is straight up a death trap. Again, trios, you can watch each other's back. Solos, absolute death trap. And it's obviously all of this has led to this friendly atmosphere in solos, because obviously if you don't be friendly in solos, you're going to die. Everyone's going to die, and you'll not be able to help it. Like that. That's it. If we lose the friendly atmosphere on solos, it's gone for good, and no one's getting out in solos with loot anymore. It will literally become unplayable, because every time you go to breach something, every time you try to extract, if everyone's just shooting each other at this point, you're completely open every single time. And I think, again, that's what really annoys the PvE fans, that they have no recourse against someone who just shoots them in the back or ambushes an extract, right? And the game's practically encouraging it because, again, it gives you no way of fighting back. You're just a sitting duck, right? And the other thing that you get with this, so you've got that with the solo queues, but again, it's so it really does put people off on that. But as I say, it's one of those where, simply put, I think this more than anything else really frustrates people. And everyone who says get good scrubbing solos, honestly, I think they're just trying to justify the fact that they're basically mugging you. They're basically a glorified mugger, and they don't like you pointing it out to them. But I think what it needs in solos is basically some way of essentially, it definitely needs some way of it being more PvE friendly on solos, because again, it's mostly just the way in which you're dying that's screwing you over. And getting on to like the things that this is leading to, the other problems. So you have these horrible interactions, these horrible ways in which you're dying in PvE. Not very fun, all that lark. But, and you can see in this clip here where we're fighting a leaper, right? Because we've just happened to annoyed it, but we've also happened to have had the gear to take it out, actually. We've found a few grenades and things in the room, and I brought a few with me, and just so happens that luckily we needed them, right? So anyway, But of course, if you try to do any kind of PvE, what you end up finding is that everyone just shoots you. And so these cool PvE engagements are becoming more and more difficult to do. And PvE, it's not just going to be okay, there's fewer people doing it, and stuff like that. But it's also going to get to a point where the PvE is going to literally be dead content. I mean, I can easily prove this. Have you killed a queen? Have you killed a matriarch? Why not? We all know why. Because you're going to get shot in the back. And there's no way you're going into a lobby, with a full team of people carrying 3 hull crackers and a bag full of, a backpack full of bombs to kill a queen or a matriarch. There's no way you're doing it. The only people that probably can are streamers who can basically go into a lobby, tell everyone on their stream to join at the same time on the same server area to basically create a bit of a pseudo private lobby. And they get the privilege of doing that, but no one else does. And so you end up with no one trying to kill these anymore. Rocketeer kills are going to become a rare thing to see. No one will be attempting to kill bombardiers or bastions anymore. We'll just get to a point where everyone's just going into buildings, murdering each other, and no one leaves with loot apart from that one guy who's then got his pick of everyone's stuff, and everything else gets left on the floor to rot. Which again then goes back into that player churn problem and the problem with gear distribution. But in the meantime, no one will get to a point where no one will be beating a queen, and no one will be fighting matriarchs anymore. No one's going to do this content, because if you do, you'll just get shot and you'll lose all your gear. So we're already getting into the trappings of it basically killing content, making people annoyed, leading to an unfun experience all round. And the actual PvP exchanges are often one-sided ambushes where they literally get the jump on you and you have no recourse to fight back. And so, again, we've already got a multitude of issues here. The other problem as well is that eventually, with the PvP, you're going to find that PvP players are going to spread like a virus, right? And it's an old tale, this. I think one of the biggest historical examples of this type of thing is something they call the Crisis of the Commons. So, back over here in England, we had something called the Common Ground. Just a bit of wasteland that anyone and everyone could use in the village or town where it were placed. And it's just basically a bit of a forested area or a field or something that's just got a load of, well, it's just free land. No one owns it, anyone can use it. And so what people would do is they would use it as much as they could to get as much resources from it as possible, so that basically they could get theirs. And what you end up with is, so you end up with everyone rushing to the common ground, and it really did become wasteland. Everyone would use absolutely everything on it and basically drain the land dry of stuff. And they wouldn't manage it properly, because if you managed it properly and looked after it, well, you're not getting all the resources from it that you could be. Even though, in the meantime, everyone else is getting as much as they can. And so you end up with everyone going, well, if everyone else is doing it, well, why am I the one trying to look after it? I'll just go and get as much as I can from it as well. So they end up, chopping down all the trees, picking all the fruits, leaving it, barren. And eventually it got took over and partitioned between various landowners because the common people couldn't be trusted with it, it turns out. It just gets basically picked clean. They go at it like a swarm of locusts. The same is happening here. right? And that's used as like an old example of how you shouldn't do economics, basically. But we're seeing the same thing play out here. In a PvP engagement, well, say you and another player meet, if you stop to say, hey Raider, don't shoot, and they just shoot, in the time that it's taken you to do that, you've already taken 2 bullets, right, out of the half dozen or so needed to kill you, whereas they have taken no damage, right? And it's like, yeah. Where the difference between like a heavy and light, well, the difference between like a heavy and a light shield is something like 4 bullets worth, right? It doesn't matter how much gear you're rocking, if they shoot first, you die first. It's as simple as that. So PvP players always have an advantage in these fights. And I think that kind of sums up the problems with the game currently, right? So we've got these players who go into a fight, and if they're shooting first, have the advantage, whereas if you're saying, hey Raider, don't shoot, you're at disadvantage, you've given away your position, they've got initiative. In addition, if they win, they get your stuff, you lose your stuff. PvP players, and then again, like I say, it's going to spread like a virus, because why are you going to keep doing that and keep losing your stuff to these people? Well, you're not. You're either going to quit out of frustration, or you're going to join their side. One or the other. Either way, someone's getting shot after all this. And so the issue then becomes a case of like, look, PvP players will just start spreading like a damn virus. And the really nasty thing is that one PvP player can completely like skewer things. Like they can really sort of just tip the balance toward PvP in a massive fashion. Like they can really influence a lobby. Just one of them, way more than a PvE player can. If two teams meet, 5 of them could be friendly players, but if one of them is PvP and just shoots first immediately, they're getting in a fight, right? It's why trio lobbies are just full of people shooting each other, because if 1 out of the 6 of you is basically going to just shoot on sight, then you're getting in a fight. And that can be the case, especially with random teams. And so everyone's just given up in trios at this point. I've not tried duos. I imagine that it's probably a similar circumstance, right? Solos, people are still hesitant, but again, anecdotally, I've been finding them to be far more aggressive the past week or two since the time of recording this. So going into like November and end of November, start of December, they're definitely more aggressive, I'm finding. And I think that's definitely true, because again, in solos, well, even in trios, one PvP player could be there on one team, and they just shoot everyone on sight. Well, if they get in several engagements in that map, that one PvP player has turned possibly, 3-4 teams meeting into a PvP encounter, right? Your team could end up having to kill 3 or 4 teams throughout that game because of that one person. The solo lobbies are even worse, because one PvP player, since solos are so vulnerable doing anything, right? They literally, and this is the other thing as well, like I'm noticing people are just straight up ignoring Ark at this point. They just don't even care. They don't even try to fight them, because if you try to fight them, well, you're vulnerable to PvP. So it's literally just turning into everyone just running through the map, shooting each other, trying to get whatever loot they can, and daring not to loot anything themselves, because if they stop for a second, they get shot. So solos, people are becoming paranoid, because again, one person can go in, start a firefight, then everyone's scrambling around what the hell's happening, they all start shooting each other, and you could have, you know, a dozen people in a lobby, but one PvP player goes in, starts firing, and the next thing you know, 6 or 7 people are dead, either by his hand or each other's or whatever, but because they're so vulnerable, the moment they think there's a threat of PvP, everyone starts shooting. So it really does, in solos, it's spreading fast, because they affect so many more engagements in a single run. And that's what I'm finding. So the question then, with all this in mind, keeping in mind that they do need, just as because I know everyone's saying, but PvP is part of the game, yes, and the game needs it, otherwise it'd be a different game. This game without PvP, I mean, it could work, you know, PvE extraction games do exist, you know, they're alright. I think probably the best one from memory was the Division Survival Mode, which literally, the way that solved this problem is separate queues. It just did separate queues. And it was great. Way ahead of its time, don't know why Ubisoft didn't make a full game out of it, because obviously Ubisoft are just full of terrible ideas. But anyway, point is yeah, there's the whole PvP thing. Without PvP, this is a different game. It doesn't have that tension. You're not looking behind all the time. It loses a bit of that allure, and I get the argument. But at the same time, the PvP players do need the PvE players, because without them, every match is suddenly a massive slog where you have to fight every single person you meet, and you won't just win engagements anymore. Literally, they're making the game worse for themselves in a certain regard by slowly basically churning out all of those PvE friendly players, right? Literally, their actions are biting them in the arse slowly over time, as they basically remove those players from the player pool, or turn them into PvP players themselves. So as the game goes on, it's going to slowly move from, again, being Mecha Hunter Wilds and becoming more Terminator Tarkov. And with the expedition system not really answering the question as to how to curtail everyone's power growth here, and being completely optional, what it means is that a lot of these players are going to remain powerful, keep all the PvP gear, and keep just mulching everyone when the wipes come. And it does. It's going to suck. So the question then is, again, well, what can be done to resolve this, right? How do we make the game, more approachable and, prevent people just getting shot repeatedly in the back and it being unfun? And again, I think the real crux of the issue is the way in which you engage in PvP, the way the engagements start. It's not necessarily that the problem is PvP itself, it's that, again, you're getting ambushed, you're getting shot in the back. And, and again, you don't feel any recourse you've got no recourse to be able to fight back, because, and again, more of a solo thing, but you are so vulnerable doing anything in the game. And I'm saying this as I'm looking at footage of me extracting here, and I'm having to check every bush, I'm going around, I'm looking around, I'm making sure no one's coming, because you're completely open during this process. And every other process. You really are. And it's a shame. The game really has nailed its fundamentals. Like the gunplay feels great, and yeah, without turning this into a complete review of its systems, without it being a complete review, it's like, yeah, the gunplay is great, the movement's fantastic, the animations are fantastic, especially on the art robots. They feel something special, as opposed to a lot of AI in other games. They're not just some generic AI that they've, given a saw and they just run at you or something. They feel far more alive than anything else, and it's definitely down to the design of them and that machine learnt movement that they do. That's definitely playing into it. And again, all that, and the sound, the look, the feel, fantastic. Like the fundamentals and little quality of life things, the user interface and the inventory being console friendly and not an absolute mess for playing on a controller or anything. It's really useful, right? But it will be an absolute shame to see that the game is probably going to be at this rate. It's just going to be a steady decline. So again, how do we fix? How do we correct it towards PvE? A couple of ideas that have kind of been swirling around in my head, because making it more PvP focused would be easy, just limit the communication with each other, stop people from being able to interact, heal randos, revive them and so on, or adding like a PvP arena mode. There's things you can do to swing it more towards PvP, but PvE, now, it's a good question, like how do we do that, and especially without really influencing the balance of the game, or even just straight up removing the PvP content, because that is there as a nuclear option. It's there as a last resort. And I think Escape from Tarkov has even, I think it was like an optional paid extra, which is just typical of that company at the moment, but I think they did add a PvE mode, and I think they've also added I think they even released like a separate version of the game that's PvP focused. So this isn't without precedence. Other games do this, but let's not have separate lobbies. I mean, you could do something like have a boss lobby, maybe sometimes. Just as there's night raids, maybe you could do a boss raid where everyone's on the same side or something, and you've all gone topside specifically to take out a boss. But again, we're swaying away from what the game is and its identity there. So, less nuclear options. One would be some kind of karma system, perhaps. You could look at a player, and if you put your crosshairs on them, it'll show an icon above them, shows their name. It doesn't normally, so the game remains immersive. You can't just, seep through walls or anything. You'd have to get your crosshairs on them for a moment. And if you did, it would place an icon above the head, just shows their name, and maybe, depending on the colour, shows you how much they've been killing other players. At least in that mode. Like, if they're killing players in trios, it shouldn't affect them in solos, but that'll give you an idea of just oh, that person is someone who's going to kill me, right? Without necessarily giving away their position or anything, or affecting anything else in the game. This would be a less intrusive way of letting someone who's a PvE player know, before giving away their position, before doing anything like that, that, hey, that person is a killer. You shouldn't call out to them. You shouldn't do anything. You should avoid them at all costs. Hell, even just start shooting, right? And you shouldn't get karma loss for shooting someone who's got bad karma, but you should for shooting people with neutral or good karma. And just, again, like a simple karma system, that would be probably one of the less intrusive ways of probably swinging things back in a PvE direction. Just, again, like ideas swirling in my mind. You could also do something like allowing players to party up, right? So this could even be done without affecting trios. You could just allow people to join your party, and if you say hey, do you want to team up? And they say the same thing, or they say yes, it immediately just throws you into a party together. A formal party where there's no team damage anymore, as if you were playing duos or trios, right? That would be one way of doing it. And yeah, it's the PvP players will complain at this point, oh, but that's teaming. I don't know why this even exists as a term, teaming, as if it's like a bad thing. Oh, you can't team with each other. Oh, it's not fair. It's the game, just as just as, and I will point this out, just as PvE players complain that PvP exists at all, like I will say the cliched thing that I've found with PvP players complaining is about teaming. It's the exact same. It's like their equivalent. Like it's as if they don't realise that yes, the game is not a free-for-all. The other players are allowed to work together, hence why you can have open mics, right? And them just formalising that and being like, hey, do you want to team up? Because then they can ask you that from behind cover. They can just say, hey, do you want to team up? And if they don't get an answer, they can assume you're hostile. And they can just start shooting. Whereas if you say yes, what it does is it eliminates the backstabbing. Just as that's literally all this will do is eliminate backstabbing. You go into a formal party, and that's it. People can already team up, right? They can already do this. They can already team up. There's no issue with it. But by making it formal, it means that you can't say yes, wait for them to start looting things, and then shoot them, right? It's almost like signing a contract or something. It just formalizes it. And honestly, I don't think this really removes a large element of the game that would make the PvP somehow, less effective. Or I think this would definitely make things a lot better. It'd really improve the quality of life for PvE players without impacting PvP too much, right? And it's mostly just there for, it's only going to affect solos, right? If you're in a trio, you're already grouped up. You're already at the team limit. So I think honestly that's like the least impactful way. That and that or the karma system will be the least impactful ways of creating some kind of positive change to help PvE players, right? Going into a more of a nuclear option here, though I'll be honest, I really like this idea. I've heard it thrown around in various different ways, but some kind of bounty system. I personally love this idea because I love anything that basically adds cool new gameplay innovations. But the idea basically being, if you kill someone, the way I would implement this at least, having thought about it a bit, if you kill someone and you steal their loot and you extract, you will be held responsible for them losing every single thing that they're carrying at the time of death, right? It will tally up the net worth of their inventory at the time, and that will be added to you as a bounty upon extracting, right? So going around and killing loads of people will quickly net you a big bounty if you manage to actually extract with the loot. Doesn't matter if you take it, it just tallies up what they lost at death. Because that's what you've caused them to lose. Just gets added on as a bounty. And then what you have is when you next join a game, other people can join as a bounty. Just as you go to okay, I'm going to go with a custom loadout, a free loadout, there'll be a bounty loadout. And, we can make it thematic. They join the game and maybe it puts them in a specific set of outfits from a few different ones they can be chosen from, where they've got, little cowboy hats and ponchos and things, long coats, right? Little sheriff stars on. And they'll be given a unique augment, just like there's a free loadout augment, there'll be a bounty augment. And it'll be like a free combat augment. It allows them to have a medium shield, they'll get a medium shield. They'll be given some better weapons than normal. So we're talking anvils, we're talking, I forget the name of it, but I think it's I want to say renegade, but the lever action rifle, maybe the Osprey sniper, yeah? It'll give them one of those weapons from that pool and a decent bit of ammo. right? They also get a decent bit of healing. They get put into a trio, and their job is to hunt you down, right? Now you're thinking, that sounds incredibly overpowered. It is, but little caveat at the end. If they end the round, they do not keep the gear. Their augment only allows them to carry a very limited amount of inventory, right? They've only got a very limited space, so that they can't just come out with loads of gear. They're there to kill the bounty and leave. They're not here to go in and come out with tons of loot, but they get a share of the bounty, depending how many of them are alive when they extract, right? So when they extract, if all 3 of them are alive, they get the bounty split 3 ways. Honestly, I think it's similar to something like like the invasions in Dark Souls, and I think it's a really cool idea. So you're gonna have to fight your way out, and you will be outnumbered, right? So when you get a high bounty, you really had best, you want to go in with a good amount of gear, or you're gonna get killed, basically. Though I'm sure most people will just suddenly take, oh, you know what, I'm going to take a free loadout, and they'll probably go in with that. But it is what it is. But again, just to kind of just put it out there, like this idea, I personally think this is the best one, and you could make it even more interesting, because obviously, well, how are they going to know where you are? I think every time you get seen by one of those cameras, when it when the little alarm goes off, the camera sees it, every time you walk through a metal detector, and every time the Ark interact with you, if Ark basically detect and shoot at you, it should ping you on the map, and they'll just see your latest location updated on the map. And in trios, if all 3 of you have a bounty in trios, it'll activate this again. So someone who's queuing for a bounty game could get queued up with you if you and everyone on your team, or just you if you're playing solo, have a bounty on you, and the bounty will be worth the collective amount. Which personally I think is, so without going as far as like, separate lobbies and things, I think it's a very good way of basically sort of mitigating the effects of PvP. And I personally like this one because the obvious reason I really like it. If you're having a bad day and you're just getting killed by PvP players, you can just press this, you just press this loadout, you go into this mode, and you can get a bit of revenge, right? A bit of catharsis. I think that's really what it's about. It gives people back that morale that they've lost, and that frustration gets washed away because they feel like they've got some payback against one of those PvP playing scum. Get them back for it. I think this is probably the best way of implementing some kind of system that would not only be fun, but again, stop that player churn. Because that's what it's about. You want people to still keep having fun. Because in the end, the PvP players might say, get good scrub, screw you, all this stuff, even though, let's be honest, most of them are just hiding in bushes at the extracts, waiting to shoot you, or creeping up on you while you're looting, and taking advantage of the fact that the game locks you into these menus for a moment and gives them an advantage. They're not really, PvP playing masterclass pros. As much as they love to claim they are, no, they are basically muggers. That's basically it. They're a load of muggers. And it prevents the PvE players who are just there to enjoy the game, have some fun, kill some robots. It allows both of them to still coexist without one basically just frustrating the other out of the game. I try not to rag on PvP players because I know my bias. I'm a PvE player. But what you've got to understand is that a PvE player can only make the game better, right? Worst case scenario, a PvP player might have to fight them for it, but they're basically just a walking loot sack to them, right? PvE players don't give a damn. Like, they're just they see you as a giant loot sack, right? Just wait, just ripe for the picking, and that's what they're gonna do. Whereas with PvP players, they are the source of so much frustration for PvE players, because they can only impact you in a negative way when you're trying to avoid combat, right? And that's what you have to keep in mind. The reason why PvE players sound so salty, so frustrated, is because they don't, like I said, they don't negatively impact the PvP players, but they constantly negatively impact them. And it's why these two different groups are having so much, such a fight online about the direction of the game. And so again, Ark and Embark, it needs to kind of walk this tightrope that it's on, balancing these two communities. And at some point, because again, keep in mind, PvP spreads. As more people fight each other, it causes other people to start fighting each other or leave the game, so then you're more likely to get into games with PvP players. Yeah, it spreads like a virus. You can, like I say, you can imagine it as like a tightrope act or a set of scales, and the PvP side is slowly getting heavier because we're taking weight out of the PvE side. It's slowly leaning in that direction because they're being churned out of the game, and so there's going to have to be a corrective action now and then to just reset it. And again, if the expedition is going to be optional and, quite frankly, at least at the time of recording, not particularly great given the amount of grind it requires every 2 months, you're going to find that it's going to really heavily tilt towards PvP really quick. So I'm looking forward to seeing what they can do. Again, they've got lots of levers and dials they can push and pull to kind of change things, right? They might not even go as far as implementing big system changes like that. They might literally just put more Ark in the game. If there's more AI threats, you're less likely to fight each other. You'll be trying not to get involved with other teams, because if you start fighting each other and then Ark show up, you're all dead. If there's so much Ark that it becomes a bit oppressive, it's like it might force everyone to play, kind of like everyone had to play at the beginning of solo. Yeah, well, at the beginning of the game release, when everyone in the solo queues and just being a bit friendly, But again, we'll see. I hope you appreciate my thoughts on it and my rambling, and I hope to see if you enjoyed this, feel free to drop a subscribe on the channel or give a video a like. Thank you very much for watching. I hope at the very least it's given you some food for thought and maybe a bit of catharsis, knowing that yes, you weren't the only one thinking this. The only one thinking, well, how are they gonna? Because I will say, I think that everyone's been, like, the honeymoon period seems to be just about over with Ark now, and everyone's been singing the game's praises. And honestly, I like Embark. I like Battlefield, and knowing that they're ex-Battlefield devs, and also being someone who's played the finals actually quite a lot, I actually, I really want to see this succeed. But whereas everyone's saying that this is the extraction game, it's finally here, the one that's going to be the genre leader and, the Call of Duty of extraction games, I don't think this is it, at least in its current iteration. I think it has the potential to be, if it can keep walking this tightrope, but it's going to have to make changes before the balance becomes lopsided towards PvP encounters. And again, curious to see what they do with that. And I imagine you likely are as well. We'll see. See what comes of it. But yes, for now, thanks very much for watching, and I hope to see you in future videos on the channel. If you're sticking around, there should be plenty of series going up in the week, doing various Let's Plays. I'm hoping to do a bit of a wrap-up of the end of the year as well, probably going over my thoughts of various Game Awards winners and nominees and what I think should have won what, and doing my own little mini roster of, little pseudo award ceremony myself, and going over predictions of what I think is going to happen in years to come with gaming. And I hope to see you for that. But Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you then.